The central hall of Galactic Academy Station buzzed with excitement. Students from across the galaxy gathered for the new semester orientation. The massive chamber stretched upward for 50 meters, with viewing platforms circling the walls. Creatures of every imaginable shape and size filled the space. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Others had feathers that changed colors with their moods. A few floated in special gravity fields, their bodies too delicate for standard atmospheric pressure. Hyun stood near the back of the crowd, trying to make himself invisible. He wore the standard academy uniform, a simple gray jumpsuit that fit loosely on his frame. Around him, alien students towered over his modest height. The Velkorians clicked their mandibles in conversation, their insect-like bodies covered in natural armor plates. The Shrikians preened their elaborate feathers, their bird-like eyes darting around the room. The Krellians stood like living statues, their reptilian scales catching the light with every subtle movement. A tone sounded through the hall. The chatter died down as Instructor Jiwon stepped onto the central platform. She was human, one of only 3 human instructors at the academy. Her black hair was pulled back tight, and her expression remained neutral as she surveyed the crowd. She tapped the control panel, and a holographic display appeared above her head. "Welcome to your second cycle at Galactic Academy," Jiwon said. Her voice carried clearly through the hall's speakers. "We have several regulation updates to review. Please direct your attention to the display." Ari. The hologram showed a list of new rules. Most were standard updates about laboratory access times and dining hall schedules. Then, the display changed to show a red-bordered announcement. The text read, "Human combat ban. Effective immediately." A ripple of confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Jiwon continued reading in the same flat tone. "All human students are hereby prohibited from participating in combat simulations, sparring exercises, physical confrontation training, and the annual combat trials. This regulation is permanent and non-negotiable." For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then someone laughed. It was Mira, a Velkorian student who stood near the front. Her laugh sounded like clicking stones, a noise that made other students turn to look. "Are you serious?" she called out. "The humans need protection from training exercises?" More laughter erupted around the hall. Talon, a Shrikian with brilliant blue and gold feathers, joined in. "I knew they were weak. But this is ridiculous," he said loudly. "What's next? Special cushions for their delicate bodies?" Jiwon's expression didn't change. She simply stared at Mira until the laughter died down. "The regulation stands. Does anyone have questions about the other updates?" Mira wasn't finished. She stepped forward, her 4 legs moving with practiced grace. "I have a question, Instructor. If humans are too fragile for basic training, why are they even allowed at this academy? Shouldn't they be at some kind of special school? Maybe one with padded walls?" The laughter returned, louder this time. Students from a dozen different species joined in. Even some of the usually quiet Manthari scholars made amused, chirping sounds. Hyun felt every eye in the room shift toward him, and the handful of other human students scattered through the crowd. His face burned, but he kept his expression blank. He had learned that showing emotion only made things worse. "The Academy accepts students based on academic merit, not physical capability," Jiwon replied. Her voice remained steady, but something flickered in her eyes. "The ban is for safety purposes. That's all you need to know." "Safety for the humans, obviously," Talon added. He spread his wings slightly, a Shrikian gesture of dismissal. "Can't have them breaking when someone bumps into them too hard." "This discussion is over," Jiwon said firmly. "Review the complete regulation list on your personal devices. Orientation is dismissed." The crowd began to disperse, but the damage was done. As Hyun made his way toward the exit, he heard whispers and comments following him. A group of Krellian students watched him pass, their vertical pupils tracking his movement. One of them, a student named Doran, tilted his head in what might have been curiosity, or contempt. Hyun couldn't tell which. In the corridor outside the central hall, the mockery continued. Someone had already created a holo image that floated in the air near the doorway. It showed a cartoon human wrapped in layers of protective padding, with the caption, "Galactic Academy's most fragile species." Students gathered around it, under quarter to welter, on Racked Academy, laughing and taking pictures with their devices. Hyun walked past without looking. He had seen worse during his first semester. The jokes about human weakness were nothing new. But this ban had given everyone fresh ammunition. He could already imagine how much worse things would get. He made his way to the residential wing, where human students had their quarters. The halls here were quieter. Most of the other species found the temperature too warm and the gravity too strong for comfort. Humans preferred heavier gravity than most spacefaring species, a fact that had surprised Hyun when he first learned it. Inside his small room, Hyun sat on his bed and stared at the wall. His personal device buzzed with messages from other human students. They were all talking about the ban, trying to figure out why the academy had implemented it. Some thought it was discrimination. Others wondered if there had been an incident that prompted the new rule. Hyun didn't reply to any of the messages. He had his own theories about the ban, theories based on things his grandfather had told him. His grandfather had been a soldier during the First Contact War, back when humanity first encountered alien species. The old man never talked much about those days, but Hyun remembered one thing he had said clearly. "We're not banned from things because we're weak, boy. Remember that." At the time, Hyun hadn't understood. Now, lying in his bed while alien students mocked his species in every corner of the station, he still wasn't sure what his grandfather had meant, but something in the old man's voice had suggested a truth that no one else seemed to know. Outside his door, Hyun heard footsteps and muffled laughter. Someone was drawing more pictures on the corridor walls. Crude images mocking human students. Hyun closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be his first day of actual classes. He would have to face Mira, Talon, and all the others who saw humans as nothing more than a joke. He would endure it, just like he had endured everything else. "That's what humans did best," his grandfather had said. They endured. 3 weeks had passed since the announcement of the human combat ban, and the mockery had only grown worse. What started as jokes in the central hall had evolved into a station-wide entertainment. Everywhere Hyun went, he encountered reminders that his species was considered the weakest in the galaxy. The xenobiology classroom occupied one of the station's largest teaching spaces. Rows of specialized seating accommodated the different body types of various species. Professor Kelth, a Manthari scholar with silver fur and 6 delicate limbs, stood at the front near a massive holographic display. The Manthari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful researchers, more interested in knowledge than conflict. "Today we examine the classification system for species survivability," Professor Kelth said in his soft, musical voice. "This system ranks species based on multiple factors including physical strength, natural armor, environmental adaptability, and regenerative capabilities." The hologram displayed a complex chart with hundreds of species listed. At the top were species like the Kravath warriors, with their reinforced bone structure and redundant organ systems. The Velkorians ranked high as well, their exoskeletons providing natural armor, and their compound eyes giving them superior vision. Even the peaceful Manthari ranked above the midpoint due to their ability to survive in extreme temperatures and their natural immunity to most toxins. Hyun watched as Professor Kelth scrolled down the list. He knew what was coming. Sure enough, near the bottom of the chart, one species appeared in orange text indicating high vulnerability status. "Humans. As you can see," Professor Kelth continued, "humans rank among the lowest in physical survivability. They possess no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced senses, and no environmental adaptations. Their skin tears easily, their bones break under relatively minor pressure, and they require a very narrow range of atmospheric conditions to survive." Mira raised one of her forearms, the sharp edges of her exoskeleton glinting. "Professor, how did such a weak species even survive on their home planet?" They seem completely defenseless. Professor Kelth's antennae twitched, a Menthari expression of thoughtfulness. An excellent question. Earth, the human homeworld, is classified as a moderate-risk planet. It lacks the extreme predators found on true death worlds, which likely explains how humans managed to develop civilization despite their physical limitations. Snickers rippled through the classroom. Hyun kept his eyes on his datapad, pretending to take notes. Beside him, Doran sat quietly. The Krellian student had been assigned as Hyun's lab partner for the semester, an arrangement neither of them had requested. After class, Hyun discovered that Mira's mockery hadn't ended with spoken comments. She had created a holo post that was spreading rapidly through the student network. The post showed an edited image of a human figure wrapped in layer after layer of protective gear, bubble wrap, and cushioning material. The caption read, "New Human Student Survival Kit. Handle with extreme care. Do not expose to sharp objects, loud noises, or mild criticism." By lunch, the post had been shared thousands of times. Students from other stations throughout the galaxy were commenting and adding their own jokes. Hyun's personal device buzzed constantly with notifications as his name appeared in comment threads. He turned off the device and sat alone in the dining hall, eating synthesized protein while alien students whispered and pointed. The real trouble began during the field exercise 2 days later. The Academy's zero-gravity training deck was a massive sphere where students practiced operating in space environments. Instructor Ji-won supervised as teams of students completed a complex equipment relay exercise. Each team member had to navigate through the weightless environment while carrying a piece of sensitive equipment from one checkpoint to another. Hyun found himself on a team with Mira, Talon, and Doran. Mira made her displeasure obvious from the start. "Try not to float away," she said to Hyun as they prepared their gear. "We can't afford to fail this exercise because the human can't handle basic movement." The exercise began smoothly. Talon went first, his wings folded tight against his body as he used small thruster packs to navigate across the sphere. He completed his section perfectly. Doran went next, his heavy reptilian body moving with surprising grace in the weightless environment. He passed the equipment to Mira, who zipped through her section with practiced ease. Then it was Hyun's turn. He took the equipment package, a delicate sensor array that had to be kept stable during transport. He activated his thruster pack and pushed off toward the final checkpoint. About halfway through his section, he noticed something wrong. The thruster pack was firing erratically, and the equipment harness felt loose. Hyun realized immediately what had happened. The safety straps had been loosened, and someone had tampered with the thruster controls. If he didn't compensate perfectly, he would either crash into the wall at dangerous speed or lose control of the equipment entirely. Either way, the team would fail, and he would take the blame. But Hyun had spent his childhood climbing, swimming, and moving through three-dimensional spaces that most aliens found disorienting. His brain processed spatial relationships differently than species that evolved in flatter terrain. In a fraction of a second, he calculated the necessary adjustments. He twisted his body, using his arms and legs to redirect his momentum. He let the faulty thruster pack fire randomly, while he compensated with precise movements. To anyone watching, it looked like a desperate flail. But Hyun was in complete control. He reached the checkpoint, secured the equipment, and stopped himself with millimeters to spare before hitting the wall. Instructor Ji-won's voice came through the speakers. "Exercise complete. Time acceptable. Hyun, report to the equipment check after you exit." As they left the training deck, Mira was already complaining. "That was pathetic," she said. "The human barely made it. We should get bonus points for compensating for his weakness." Doran said nothing, but Hyun noticed the Krellian watching him with an unusual intensity. Those vertical pupils tracked every movement Hyun made as they walked back toward the main corridor. That evening, Hyun was returning to his quarters when Doran appeared beside him. The Krellian moved silently despite his size, a hunting trait from his species' evolution. Your thruster pack was sabotaged, Doran said without preamble. I saw Mira working on the equipment before the exercise. Hyun kept walking. It doesn't matter. You should report her. She endangered you deliberately. And what would happen? Her word against mine. Besides, I completed the exercise. Doran grabbed Hyun's shoulder, stopping him. The grip was firm but not painful. That's my question. How did you complete it? Your reflexes, your spatial awareness. They were too good. No one else could have compensated for that kind of malfunction so quickly. Hyun looked up at the Krellian. Doran stood nearly 2 meters tall, with scales that could deflect most small projectiles. His jaw contained rows of sharp teeth, designed for tearing flesh. His claws could cut through metal. And yet, he was genuinely curious, rather than threatening. Maybe the ban isn't about protecting us, Hyun said quietly. Maybe it's about protecting everyone else. Doran's pupils narrowed to slits. What does that mean? Hyun pulled away from the Krellian's grip. It means you should stop asking questions about things you don't want answers to. He walked away, leaving Doran standing in the corridor. Behind him, Hyun could feel those reptilian eyes watching, calculating, wondering. The Krellian was smart enough to recognize that something didn't add up. The so-called weakest species in the galaxy had just performed a feat that would have challenged even experienced pilots. But Doran, like everyone else, didn't have the full picture. None of them did. They saw humans as fragile, weak, and pathetic. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what humans were really capable of when pushed, and Hyun intended to keep it that way, for everyone's sake. The announcement appeared on every display screen throughout the station simultaneously. Bold letters proclaimed the upcoming annual combat trials, the most prestigious event at Galactic Academy. Students would demonstrate their species' natural combat abilities, tactical thinking, and warrior heritage. For many species, performing well in the trials meant guaranteed positions in the Galactic Defense Corps or prestigious security firms. Hyun read the announcement in his room and immediately felt a knot form in his stomach. The combat trials were mandatory for all students. Or rather, they had been mandatory. Now there was a small addendum at the bottom of the announcement. Students under regulatory combat exemption are excused from participation. He knew what was coming. The mockery had been bad enough already. This would make it 10 times worse. The next morning proved him right. He walked into the common area to find a crowd gathered around Mira. The Valkorian held court like a queen, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction as other students listened to her latest commentary. Of course the humans get to skip the trials, she was saying. Can't have them getting hurt by actual warriors. They might break a nail or hurt their feelings. Laughter echoed through the space. Talon added his own comment, his feathers ruffling with amusement. My species has a saying. The bird that cannot fly should not nest in tall trees. Humans shouldn't be at a military academy if they can't handle military training. Hyun tried to walk past without engaging, but Mira spotted him. Her compound eyes locked onto him instantly. Perfect timing, she called out. We were just discussing the trials. Tell me, Hyun, how does it feel, knowing your entire species is too weak to participate? I'm fine with it, Hyun said quietly, continuing to walk. But Mira wasn't finished. She moved quickly, her 4 legs carrying her in front of him, blocking his path. Actually, I have a better idea. What if we petition the Academy Council? I'm sure they would lift the ban just for you. Then you could show everyone what humans are really made of. The crowd had grown larger. Students from multiple species gathered to watch the confrontation. Hyun recognized the gleam in Mira's compound eyes. This wasn't a genuine offer. It was theater. A public humiliation designed to maximize his embarrassment. I decline, Hyun said. You decline? Mira's voice grew louder. Or are you too scared? Is that it? You know you'd lose to any real warrior, so you hide behind your precious ban? Murmurs spread through the crowd. Hyun felt dozens of eyes on him, watching, judging, waiting for his response. He took a deep breath and spoke calmly. The ban exists for a reason. I respect the Academy's decision. The reason is that you're weak, Talon chimed in. Just admit it. Humans are the weakest species in the galaxy. That's why you need protection from competition that every other species handles without problems. More students voiced their agreement. What little respect humans had earned through academic achievement was evaporating. Hyun could see it in their faces. They saw him as a coward, hiding behind regulations because he couldn't face real challenges. A commanding voice cut through the crowd. This gathering is blocking a main corridor. Disperse immediately. Instructor Jiwon stood nearby, her arms crossed and her expression hard. The students began to scatter, but Mira held her ground for a moment longer. We're just having a conversation, instructor, Mira said sweetly. Discussing how we might help our human classmate participate in our traditions. Jiwon stepped closer to Mira, close enough that the height difference became obvious. Despite being shorter, Jiwon's presence somehow made the large Velkorian seem small. You're playing with fire you don't understand, student. I suggest you stop before you get burned. Mira's mandibles clicked in what might have been nervousness, but she maintained her confident posture. With respect, instructor. That sounds like you're being overly protective. Maybe if humans weren't coddled so much, they might develop some actual strength. Dismissed, Jiwon said flatly. Her tone left no room for argument. The crowd dispersed fully this time. Mira walked away with Talon, but Hyun heard them laughing as they went. The damage was done. By the end of the day, the entire station would know that the human had been challenged and had refused out of fear. That night, Mira, Talon, and Doran gathered in Talon's quarters. The Shriekian's room was decorated with perches and had airflow systems that mimicked wind patterns from his homeworld. Mira paced back and forth, still irritated by Instructor Jiwon's interference. She acts like humans are some kind of protected species, Mira complained. They're weak. That's a fact, not an opinion. Why does she defend them so aggressively? Doran had been quiet all evening, but now he spoke up. Something doesn't add up. During the zero-gravity exercise, Hyun's equipment was malfunctioning. I saw it, but he compensated perfectly. His spatial awareness and reflexes were exceptional. Talon ruffled his feathers dismissively. Lucky accident. Even weak species get lucky sometimes. It wasn't luck, Doran insisted. And there's the ban itself. Why would the Academy implement such a specific regulation? It's not a general safety rule. It specifically targets humans, and specifically prohibits combat training. Mira stopped pacing. Her compound eyes reflected the light as she considered Doran's words. You think there's more to it? I think we should find out, Doran said. The Academy archives contain records of every regulation and the justification for each one. If we access the restricted files, we might find the real reason for the human combat ban. Talon looked uncertain. Accessing restricted files is a serious offense. Are you afraid? Mira challenged him. It was the same taunt she had used on Hyun, and it worked just as effectively on Talon. The Shriekian's feathers rose in indignation. Of course not. Let's do it. The Academy's network security was sophisticated, but it was designed to prevent external attacks, not student curiosity. Doran had spent years studying computer systems as part of his engineering track. Within an hour, he had navigated through the outer security layers and located the administrative archives. They searched through files on regulations, safety protocols, and historical documents. Most were boring administrative records. Then Doran found something unusual. A file with a red priority marker and multiple security warnings. Incident report. First contact war. Human conflict footage. Doran read aloud. Access restricted. Psychological trauma risk. Viewing discretion advised. Authorization required from council members only. The three students looked at each other. This was clearly what they had been searching for. Whatever happened during the First Contact War had led directly to the human combat ban. "Can you open it?" Mira asked. Doran's claws moved across the holographic keyboard. "The encryption is heavy. But yes, I can break it. It will take a few minutes." They waited in tense silence as Doran worked. Multiple warnings appeared on the screen, each one more severe than the last. The system detected their unauthorized access and threatened automatic reporting to security. Doran bypassed each warning with increasing difficulty. Finally, the file unlocked. A simple video player interface appeared with a timestamp showing the footage was over 200 years old. The description read, "Comprehensive documentation of human combat capabilities during the Krivath incursion. Footage compiled for Galactic Council review." Quote, "Should we really watch this?" Talon asked. For the first time, he sounded genuinely uncertain. Mira's mandibles clicked decisively. "We came this far. Play it." Doran hesitated, his claw hovering over the play button. Something about the warnings bothered him. The Academy didn't label things with psychological trauma risks lightly, but curiosity overwhelmed caution. He pressed play. The screen filled with images of a planet from space. Earth, the human homeworld, with its distinctive blue oceans and white clouds. Text appeared over the image. Day 1. Krivath fleet enters Earth orbit. Then, the footage changed, and the three students leaned forward to watch what would change their understanding of humans forever. The video began with standard military documentation. A calm narrator's voice, speaking in Galactic Common, explained the context. 217 years ago, the Krivath Dominion identified Earth as a target for expansion. Initial scans indicated a technologically primitive species with no notable defensive capabilities. The footage showed Krivath warriors, and even through the screen, they looked terrifying. Each Krivath stood over 2 meters tall, with thick armored hide that could stop most conventional weapons. Their 4 arms ended in claws designed for ripping and tearing. They had redundant organ systems that allowed them to survive injuries that would kill most species instantly. The Krivath had conquered 40 worlds before turning their attention to Earth. Analysis of the native species, humans, showed no natural defenses. The narrator continued. No armor plating, no venom, no enhanced strength, no remarkable sensory capabilities. Krivath Military Command predicted total victory within 10 solar days. Mira watched intently, her compound eyes processing every detail. This matched everything she knew about humans. They were weak, defenseless, easy prey. The Krivath should have won easily. The video shifted to show the first landing. Krivath dropships descended on a human city. The quality was grainy but clear enough to see human civilians fleeing in panic. Krivath warriors emerged from the ships, weapons ready, expecting minimal resistance. Then the fighting started. And nothing went as the Krivath expected. The first surprise came within hours. Human military forces responded with a ferocity that shocked the Krivath commanders. The footage showed human soldiers attacking with weapons that seemed primitive by galactic standards. But they used them with devastating effectiveness. More importantly, they fought with a determination that bordered on insanity. One clip showed a human soldier taking a blast that burned through his armor and into his chest. The wound would have killed a Krivath within seconds, as their redundant organs shut down to prevent system-wide failure. But the human stayed on his feet. He kept fighting, kept shooting, for another 40 seconds, before finally collapsing. In that time, he took down 3 Krivath warriors. Doran's pupils narrowed to slits. That's impossible. The trauma alone should have caused immediate unconsciousness. The narrator provided explanation over the footage. Human pain tolerance exceeds all known species by a significant margin. Their adrenal response system allows them to continue functioning despite catastrophic injuries. This trait appears to be an evolutionary adaptation from their homeworld. More footage rolled. A Krivath patrol entered a human building, pursuing what they thought was a small group of civilians. The humans had turned the building into a trap. Explosives, collapsing floors, improvised weapons made from construction materials. The entire Krivoth patrol was eliminated. The human casualties included children and elderly individuals who had volunteered to serve as bait for the trap. They sacrificed their own young, Talon whispered, his feathers lying flat against his body in distress. The footage continued relentlessly. It showed human soldiers holding defensive positions for days without sleep, rotating through shifts, where exhausted fighters would stay alert through sheer willpower. It showed medics running into active combat zones to retrieve wounded comrades, often dying in the process. It showed humans adapting to Krivoth tactics within hours, learning from each engagement and sharing information through their command networks. One particularly disturbing segment showed a human squad that had been cut off from supplies for 72 hours. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and had no hope of reinforcement. The logical action would be surrender. Instead, they fortified their position and fought. When they ran out of ammunition, they used Krivoth weapons they had captured. When those failed, they used knives and improvised weapons. When those broke, they used their bare hands. The final survivor of that squad killed 2 Krivoth warriors with nothing but a piece of broken metal before finally dying from accumulated wounds. The Krivoth, who later reviewed the battle footage, were horrified. They had expected to fight soldiers. They had encountered something else entirely. Human psychological warfare proved equally effective, the narrator said as the footage shifted to interrogation recordings. Captured Krivoth warriors spoke in trembling voices about the humans they had fought. They described enemies who would not stop, who fought through injuries that should have been fatal, who showed no fear even when facing certain death. The video showed battlefield analysis. Human tactics evolved rapidly. They identified Krivoth weak points within weeks. They reverse-engineered captured technology and started producing their own versions of Krivoth weapons. Most impressively, they learned to exploit the Krivoth's own strengths against them. Krivoth warriors relied on their redundant organ systems and thick armor. They expected to survive hits that would kill other species. Humans started using this against them, setting up battles where the Krivoth's confidence in their durability led them into traps designed specifically to overwhelm even their impressive biology. The narrator's voice took on a different tone as the footage showed the turning point of the war. By day 47, Krivoth Command recognized a fundamental error in their assessment. Humans had not developed on a peaceful world. Earth is classified as a Class 7 danger world, with extreme predators, hostile environments, and endemic diseases that would devastate most spacefaring species. The video displayed Earth's ecosystem, predators that hunted in packs with sophisticated coordination, diseases that killed millions but drove evolutionary adaptations in survivors, climate variations that ranged from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. Humans had evolved in constant competition with their environment and with each other. Humans are persistence hunters, the narrator explained. A clip showed ancient footage of human hunters on Earth, tracking prey for days without rest. They evolved to outlast their targets through superior endurance. They developed pattern recognition that allows rapid adaptation to new threats. They possess a threat response system that makes them more effective under stress, rather than less. More battle footage rolled. The tide of the war had shifted completely. Human forces were pushing the Krivoth back, systematically. The Krivoth Dominion, which had conquered 40 worlds, was losing to a species they had considered primitive. Then came the footage that made all 3 students recoil. It showed the final battle, when human forces boarded the Krivoth command ship. The fighting was brutal. But what stood out was the humans' faces. They showed no fear, no hesitation, just cold determination. These were people who had decided their enemy would not survive, and they pursued that goal with absolute commitment. The Krivoth commander's final transmission played over the footage. Retreat immediately. Do not engage humans. They are Death Worlders. We cannot win. The video shifted to show a Galactic Council meeting. Representatives from dozens of species sat in the great chamber, watching the same footage the students were now seeing. The reaction was universal shock and horror. An elderly Manthari counselor spoke on the recording. "We must address the human question immediately. This species poses a potential threat to galactic stability." But another counselor, a wise Kelrathi diplomat, shook his head. "You misunderstand. The humans won, but note how they stopped. Once the Kravath retreated, humans ceased all hostile action. They didn't pursue. They didn't seek revenge. They stopped. That shows remarkable restraint." The debate continued in the recording, but the conclusion was clear. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to implement what would eventually become the human combat ban. The final segment of the video showed statistics. Human casualties during the war had been enormous, proportionally far higher than Kravath losses. But humans had kept fighting regardless. The psychological profiles showed that humans possessed an unusual trait: the ability to continue fighting even when they knew death was probable. Most species would surrender when survival became unlikely. Humans treated probable death as just another problem to work through. The narrator's final words echoed through the room. The human combat ban was not implemented to protect humans from other species. It was implemented to protect other species from humans. Humans restrain themselves by choice, not because they lack capability. They have chosen to pursue peaceful coexistence despite possessing traits that make them exceptionally dangerous in conflict situations. This restraint should be respected, not mistaken for weakness. Do not provoke them. Do not force them to remember what they are capable of becoming. The video ended. The room fell into absolute silence. Mira's mandibles had stopped clicking. Talon's feathers lay completely flat against his body. A Shriekian fear response. Doran stared at the blank screen, his vertical pupils wide with shock. "We need to delete our access logs," Doran finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If anyone finds out we watch this, if they think we might provoke the humans after seeing this footage." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They all understood now. Every joke, every mockery, every casual insult had been directed at a species that was choosing mercy over violence. They had been poking at something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Something that was staying calm through conscious effort rather than inability to respond. The viewing room remained silent for long minutes after the footage ended. Mira stood frozen, her four legs locked in position. Her compound eyes stared at the blank screen where images of human soldiers had just been displayed. Soldiers who fought through injuries that should have killed them. Soldiers who turned entire buildings into weapons. Soldiers who tracked their enemies for days without rest. Talon's feathers had turned a dull gray, a color that appeared only when Shriekians experienced genuine fear. His wings trembled slightly. He kept replaying the image of that last human survivor. The one who had killed 2 armored Kravath warriors with nothing but a piece of broken metal and sheer determination. Doran was the first to move. His claws shook as he deleted their access logs from the system. "We never watched this," he said quietly. "We never searched for this file. We never had this conversation." "Agreed," Mira whispered. Her usual confident voice had vanished completely. They left separately, each returning to their quarters by different routes. None of them slept that night. Every time Mira closed her eyes, she saw the footage. She thought about every joke she had made, every casual insult, every moment of mockery. She thought about the thruster pack she had sabotaged during the field exercise. Hyun could have retaliated at any time. He could have hurt her, possibly even killed her, and she would never have seen it coming. The footage had shown humans moving with shocking speed when they chose to act. Their pattern recognition meant they could predict movements before they happened. Their endurance meant they could wait for the perfect moment to strike. But he hadn't done anything. He had simply completed the exercise and walked away. Not because he couldn't fight back, but because he chose not to. The next morning, news spread through the academy in whispers. Other students had noticed the file access in the system logs before Doran managed to completely erase the trail. They didn't know who had watched the restricted footage, but rumors spread that someone had discovered the truth about the human combat ban. More students found ways to access the file. By the end of the day, dozens had watched it. By the end of the week, hundreds of students throughout the academy knew. The footage spread like a virus through the student network, each person sharing it quietly with others. The mockery stopped abruptly. When Hyun walked through the corridors, students moved aside, not with the casual dismissiveness they had shown before, but with something closer to respect. Mixed with unease, the whispers continued. But now they carried a different tone. "Is it true?" someone would ask. "I saw the footage myself," another would answer. Every second of it. The combat trials announcement remained posted, but no one mentioned it around human students anymore. The jokes about human weakness vanished from the student network. Someone tried to post another mocking image, but it was immediately reported and removed, with a note from the administration warning against harassment. 3 days after Doran, Mira, and Talon had watched the footage, the academy called a mandatory assembly. All students gathered in the central hall once again, but the atmosphere was completely different from the orientation where the human combat ban had been announced. Instructor Ji-won stood on the central platform, wearing her formal uniform rather than the standard academy jumpsuit. The uniform showed her rank insignia from her military service, something she rarely displayed. Beside her stood 2 other human instructors, all wearing similar formal uniforms with various medals and decorations. "I am aware that restricted footage has been circulating through the student network," Ji-won began. Her voice carried the same flat tone as always, but now students listened with full attention. Rather than punish those who accessed classified files, the academy administration has decided to address this matter directly. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. When her gaze passed over Hyun, he saw something in her expression. Not anger, but perhaps sadness, maybe even resignation. "The human combat ban exists for a very specific reason," Ji-won continued. "That reason is not human weakness. It is human capacity. I am a veteran of the First Contact War. I fought in the battles shown in that footage. I watched friends die. I watched enemies die. I learned things about my own species that I wish I could forget." The hall remained completely silent. Students who would have chattered or joked during previous assemblies now stood frozen. "Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day," Ji-won said. "We developed traits that helped us survive. Pain tolerance that lets us function through injuries. Endurance that lets us outlast almost any predator. Pattern recognition that helps us identify and adapt to threats. An adrenal system that makes us more dangerous when we're injured rather than less." She walked slowly across the platform as she spoke. "But we also developed something else. We developed the ability to choose, to show mercy, to restrain ourselves even when our instincts scream at us to fight. The ban exists because we already know how to fight. We're born knowing it. What we need to learn here is control." One of the other human instructors stepped forward. His uniform showed even more decorations than Ji-won's. "I commanded forces during the final battle of the First Contact War," he said. "When the Krevith retreated, my soldiers wanted to pursue. Every instinct we had told us to eliminate the threat permanently, but we chose to stop. That choice was harder than any battle we fought." Ji-won nodded. "That's what we teach human students at this academy. Not how to fight. We already know that. We teach them how to exist peacefully alongside species that didn't evolve in constant danger. We teach them patience. We teach them that strength doesn't always mean violence." She looked directly at Mira. The Valkorian felt those human eyes focusing on her, and she wanted to hide. "Some of you have been mocking human students for weeks. You've made jokes about their weakness. You've created insulting images and posts. You've sabotaged equipment during exercises. And through all of that, the human students showed you more restraint than you showed them respect. The silence in the hall felt heavy. Mira's legs trembled. She wanted to apologize but couldn't find words adequate to express what she was feeling. The combat trials will proceed as scheduled, Jiwan announced. Human students will participate as medics, strategists, and support personnel, not because we can't fight, but because we choose to contribute in other ways. That choice deserves respect, not mockery. The assembly ended shortly after. Students dispersed quietly, without the usual chatter and social interactions. The weight of understanding hung over everyone. Later that evening, Mira found Hyun in the library. He sat alone, studying as he always did. She approached slowly, uncertain how to begin. Her mandibles clicked nervously. "I need to apologize," she said quietly, "for everything. The jokes, the sabotage, all of it. I didn't understand." Hyun looked up from his datapad. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed he was listening. "I watched the footage," Mira continued. "I saw what your species can do. I saw what you could have done to me at any time, but you chose not to. I don't know how to make up for what I did." "You don't need to make up for it," Hyun said calmly. "You just need to do better going forward. That's all any of us can do." Mira felt something she hadn't expected: relief. The human she had tormented for weeks was offering her forgiveness without demanding anything in return. "Why didn't you fight back? Even once? You could have stopped me easily." Hyun set down his datapad. "Because fighting is easy. Any species can learn to hurt others, staying calm when you're angry, showing mercy when you want revenge, choosing peace when violence would be simpler. That's what's actually hard. That's what makes us human." Doran approached them, having witnessed the conversation from nearby. The Krellian's vertical pupils were wide, a sign of respect in his species. "The question I asked you before, about the ban protecting everyone else. You were telling the truth." "Yes," Hyun confirmed. "We don't want to be feared. We just want to be understood." Over the following weeks, the atmosphere at the academy changed completely. Human students were no longer treated as jokes or weaklings. Other species began to understand that the quiet, calm humans walking through the corridors were choosing that calmness. They were restraining something powerful, not displaying something weak. The combat trials arrived, and human students participated as promised, in support roles. But something unexpected happened. The non-human competitors began seeking advice from human students. They asked about tactics, about endurance, about how to push through challenges. Hyun found himself consulting with Doran's combat team. "Your species is naturally stronger," Hyun explained, reviewing their training footage. "But you're not using your endurance effectively. You're fighting like sprinters when you should fight like marathon runners. Pace yourselves. Outlast your opponents rather than trying to overwhelm them immediately." The advice worked. Doran's team performed better than they ever had before. Not because they became more aggressive, but because they learned patience and persistence from human strategic thinking. On the final day of the trials, the academy held a closing ceremony. Winners received their awards, but the biggest moment came when instructor Jiwan announced a new initiative. Starting next semester, the academy will offer a new course: Comparative Species Psychology. Human instructors will teach other species about human evolution, instincts, and our approaches to conflict resolution. In exchange, human students will learn from other species about their own unique perspectives. The announcement received genuine applause. Understanding had replaced mockery. Respect had replaced contempt. After the ceremony, Doran found Hyun outside, watching stars through the observation window. "I'm glad humans choose peace," the Krellian said simply. Hyun smiled slightly. "So are we. Trust me. We much prefer being your friends than your enemies." They stood together in comfortable silence. Two students from completely different worlds, finally understanding each other. The human combat ban remained in place, but now everyone knew what it really meant. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy. A promise that despite their capacity for violence, they would choose a better path. And that choice, more than any battle they could have won, earned them true respect among the stars.